Discipline isn't just about routines, rituals, or waking up at dawn. It's about your path. It's about building a mindful structure in a world that constantly lures you into noise, craving, and confusion. And if your mind feels scattered, restless, or heavy, it doesn't mean you're broken. It simply means you've been living without Dhamma, without your own inner refuge. In the absence of inner order, the mind begins to decay in subtle ways, through distracted mornings, lost intentions, and a quiet ache of disconnection. The Buddha understood this long before modern science did. He didn't preach motivation. He didn't wait for the right moment to act. He taught a path, a Noble Eightfold Path, a way of being that holds you steady even when emotions swell, when meaning fades, or when life feels uncertain. Because he saw clearly, without mindfulness and right effort, the mind becomes a servant to the ever-changing world. But when you begin to reclaim your awareness, when you choose mindfulness over reactivity, intention over craving, presence over distraction, you become grounded in a power that doesn't depend on circumstances. This isn't about hacks or habits. It's about transforming how you see, think, and walk through life. It's about making inner discipline sacred, not rigid or forced, but conscious and compassionate. Whether you're a student, an artist, a parent, or simply someone trying to hold yourself together in a noisy world, these 8 Buddhist principles will reshape how you manage your time, your energy, and your mind. They're not rules, they're reminders that you don't have to feel ready or perfect to walk the path. You just have to take the next breath, take the next step, especially when it's hard, especially when it's quiet, especially when no one sees, because true discipline doesn't need recognition. It doesn't seek applause. It just is. Silent, steady, compassionate. And one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just calm your thoughts, you liberated yourself. Principle 1. Discipline is compassion made visible. Ask yourself this: how do you treat your own mind when no one is watching? Not when others expect something. Not when there's praise or pressure. I mean those silent moments, when it's just you, your intentions, and the path ahead. Because that's where real practice lives. Not in rituals or robes, but in those private, unseen decisions where you choose between grasping and letting go, between reactivity and awareness. In Buddhist teachings, discipline isn't punishment. It's not about harsh rules or suppressing joy. It's not cold or rigid. It's about metta, loving kindness toward yourself. It's about choosing actions rooted in clarity, not craving. It's about honoring your path, not with force, but with deep care. Choosing what leads to freedom, not fleeting comfort, not because you despise who you are, but because you no longer abandon yourself. The Buddha once said, "It is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles, because if you cannot understand your own mind, your impulses, your fears, your resistance, then you are ruled by what is loudest in the moment. A desire, a distraction, a mood. And slowly, without noticing, you become disconnected from your own awakening." Most people think discipline means pressure, but true discipline in the Dhamma is gentle. It's not a battle, it's a return, a remembering. It's standing in your own life and whispering, "I will no longer turn away from myself." Let's look at a simple moment. The alarm rings at 6 a.m. You're tired. Resistance arises. Your body aches to return to sleep. But something shifts. You made a vow, not to society, but to your practice. So you rise, you stretch, you breathe. Not because it feels good, not because you're inspired, but because that moment is sacred. It says, "My path matters more than my passing emotions." That is mindfulness. That is strength. Or take this, you've committed to caring for your health, and now you sit at a table full of temptation, laughter, and peer pressure. You feel the pull to blend in, to let go. But you pause, you breathe, you remember your vow, not out of fear, but out of compassion. That moment may appear small, but it is the very heart of practice. Right effort, right mindfulness, right intention. Discipline also teaches others how to meet you. When you value your time, people notice. When you uphold boundaries, they feel them. When you keep your word to yourself, your presence changes. You walk differently, not with pride, but with peace, because you are living in alignment, not perfect, but present. And that is rare in a world addicted to noise. But don't pretend it's easy. Practice will illuminate your shadows. It will show how often you've made excuses, telling yourself you'll do it tomorrow, that this one time doesn't matter, that later will always be there. It calls you back from fantasy to reality, from imagining change to embodying it. That's why many avoid the path, because it's easier to cling to comfort than to sit with discomfort. But this is exactly where the teachings meet you. Not in escape, but in direct awareness. Not in waiting for the right mood, but in right action, moment by moment. As the Buddha taught, with sustained effort, one overcomes suffering. So if you're struggling with discipline, don't search for shortcuts. Look inward. Where are you abandoning your own awakening? Where are you trading lasting peace for temporary pleasure? And more importantly, what would shift if you began to show up for yourself the way you show up for those you love? Discipline is not a trend. It's not performance. It is the way of the Dharma, quiet, steady, sacred. It's how you declare, I value this life. I will not sleepwalk through it. You don't need to change everything today. Just begin. Keep one small promise. Make one decision with clarity. Reclaim one quiet morning. That's how you start to feel your own strength again. Because true power isn't in perfection. It's in presence. It's in trust. It's in knowing that day by day, you are becoming someone your future self can rely on. And that kind of inner peace? No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away. Principle 2. Cultivate effort aligned with your inner nature. Not all effort is the same, and not all effort leads to liberation. In Buddhism, we speak of right effort, one that arises not from force or imitation, but from deep understanding of your own mind. Some people begin their day in silence, meditate at dawn, and live by a strict routine, and feel peace. Others try the same, and feel burdened, disconnected, even restless. Why? Because effort that doesn't harmonize with your nature becomes just another form of suffering. It may appear disciplined on the outside, it may draw praise, but if it's not rooted in your temperament, your energy, your karmic tendencies, it will eventually create tension instead of clarity. The Buddha never asked his followers to conform to one rigid form of practice. He offered the Eightfold Path not as a cage, but as a way, adaptable, compassionate, mindful of where each person begins their journey. Just as the Buddha guided both monks and householders, farmers and kings, we too must realize, one way does not fit all. The Dharma invites us to know ourselves deeply, so we can shape a path that reflects not who others want us to be, but who we truly are. Imagine a monk who thrives in the forest, rising before the sun to meditate in silence. Now imagine a layperson whose practice blossoms in the midst of family life, through kindness, patience, and mindful presence. Both are cultivating discipline, but not in the same way. The monk's form may involve hours of seated meditation, celibacy, and renunciation. The layperson's discipline may mean bringing compassion to every interaction, maintaining awareness while working, and honoring a few moments of reflection each day. The principle is the same. The expression is unique. So ask yourself, what kind of rhythm supports my awakening? Not what wins approval, not what matches a trend, but what truly nourishes your peace, your clarity, your inner stillness. Some minds need long, deep silence. Others respond better to short moments of focused attention. What matters is not how strict the form is, but whether the form leads to freedom. This is where mindfulness becomes essential. If you're constantly abandoning a structure, perhaps it's not a failure of will, but a misalignment with your nature. Perhaps you're forcing yourself into someone else's idea of discipline, hoping it will transform you. But discipline, in the Buddhist sense, isn't about control. It's about wisdom. It's about letting go of what doesn't serve your liberation and embracing what does. Let's consider a simple example. Suppose you try to wake up at 4 a.m. because a spiritual book insists early rising is essential. But every morning you struggle. You feel unworthy. You label yourself undisciplined. But what if your clearest insights arise at night? What if your body, your flow, your awareness align better with evenings? Then right effort would mean respecting that truth and crafting a path that supports your wakefulness, not fights it. This isn't about giving up. It's about giving up resistance to who you are. The Buddha taught us to understand our mind, not to suppress it. When we work with our nature, not against it, effort becomes joyful. Practice becomes sustainable. The mind grows calm, not through harshness, but through harmony. This is when discipline transforms. It stops being a battle and starts becoming a rhythm, a flow, an offering. You move through your life with presence, not because you're forcing yourself, but because your path feels like a return to your true home. That is the aim, not perfection, not performance, but a structure that nourishes clarity, protects attention, and honors your path toward liberation. So today, reflect. Am I building a discipline that reflects my nature? Or am I still chasing borrowed paths, hoping they'll awaken me? And then ask, what would it look like to craft a rhythm that is both gentle and firm, one that supports both my strengths and my shadows? Because true discipline isn't about fitting into an idea of who you should be. It's about walking the path that leads you gently back to who you truly are. Principle 3. Without mindful structure, suffering grows silently. Disorder rarely shouts. It whispers through the unread messages, the skipped meditation, the clutter you'll handle tomorrow, and the endless background noise in your mind that you've grown too used to. It's subtle, software, but it accumulates. Slowly, moment by moment, it burdens the heart. Until one day, you find yourself asking, why do I feel so heavy? In the Buddha's teachings, this is the nature of sankhara, mental formations that arise from habits, impressions, and distractions. When left unexamined, they form a quiet storm beneath the surface. When the mind is scattered, suffering deepens. When life lacks intention, dukkha, that subtle unease, takes root. This is the unseen cost of a life without mindful order. Not just lost time, but lost presence, lost clarity, a drifting away from your path of awakening. Many think it's harmless to stay flexible, to just respond to life as it comes. But the truth is, if you don't direct your awareness, the world will direct it for you. Distractions don't wait for your invitation. Cravings arise unannounced, and suffering often enters through the doors we forgot to close. The danger is not always obvious. This kind of disorder doesn't strike like lightning. It seeps in like water. You skip your evening reflection. You start reaching for your phone before your breath. You forget to observe your thoughts before speaking. You eat in a rush. You avoid silence. And nothing collapses. Not immediately, but something in you dims. The Buddha taught, what you frequently think and ponder upon, that will become the inclination of your mind. If we allow chaos to rule our attention, we cultivate a mind that's reactive, not reflective. Without inner order, we live at the mercy of impulse, tossed around by desire and aversion. And that is not freedom. That is silent bondage. But let's be clear, Buddhist order is not about rigid control. It's not about scripting every second of your life. It's about establishing gentle boundaries, mindful structures that honor what truly matters. These are not restrictions. They are refuges, a morning of stillness, a set time for meditation, a day of silence each week, turning off notifications, a daily intention journal. These aren't acts of limitation. They're acts of compassion for your future self, for your inner peace, for your awakening. When you reclaim your attention, you reclaim your energy. And with that energy, you begin to choose to respond with wisdom rather than react with habit. That is right effort, not forcing the world, but cultivating clarity within it. This begins with inner awareness, a simple but profound recognition of where your mind is burdened. So ask yourself gently, what have I been silently tolerating that drains me? Is it the clutter in your space, the worry you've refused to name, the conversation you fear having, the dream you postpone because it intimidates you? Whatever it is, bring it into the light of awareness and then make a decision. Not a perfect one, just a mindful one. Because the longer we live in disorder, the more we suffer, not through dramatic collapse, but through quiet erosion. And that kind of suffering is the most dangerous. It hides behind busyness, behind distraction, behind denial. So, create structure, not for praise, not for perfection, but to offer your mind the stillness it's been yearning for. Because discipline in Buddhism is not about domination, it's about liberation through harmony. And mindful order is the ground where freedom can finally take root. Principle 4, comfort can cloud the path. Stay mindful. Success, like pleasure, is deeply seductive. It convinces you the climb is over, that you've arrived, that there's nothing more to awaken to. But that illusion is where the danger begins. Not in failure, but in ease. Because ease breeds craving, and craving leads us back into the cycle of suffering. One of the most subtle traps the mind sets is this: you've earned it. Not rest, but indulgence. A lapse in your mindfulness, a break from your precepts, a moment of drifting. But these moments don't nourish you, they erode you. The Buddha never condemned success, but he did warn us against becoming intoxicated by it. He taught that attachment to pleasure, to gain, to praise is one of the 4 corruptions that can cloud even the most sincere practitioner's path. When we cling to what once felt good, we forget what brought clarity in the first place. Consider this: you've practiced, you've let go, you've cultivated discipline. Then a result comes: peace, recognition, achievement. And without noticing, your awareness begins to dull. You stop meditating with full presence. You skip your morning mindfulness. You justify distractions. You tell yourself, it's fine, I've made it. But in the Dhamma, arrival is an illusion. The path is never done. And if you stop walking, you start slipping, gently, quietly, into delusion. This doesn't mean you shouldn't rest. Rest is part of wise effort. The Buddha himself taught the balance of effort and ease. But there is a vast difference between right rest, which rejuvenates, and mindless indulgence, which blinds. The key is sati, awareness. What the Buddha cautioned against wasn't rest, it was unawareness. It was forgetting the flame that guides you. When you begin to live off past effort rather than present mindfulness, you drift. You stop growing. You become a version of yourself that's still, but not serene, just stagnant. In daily life, this could look like neglecting your relationships, assuming love sustains itself, or ceasing to reflect, believing you already know enough, or letting go of your precepts because the world tells you you've earned the right to relax. It doesn't happen dramatically. It happens through comfort dressed as reward. So how do you remain awake when life becomes easy? You return to right intention. You ask yourself, where am I growing dull? Where have I stopped observing my mind? Where have I mistaken comfort for liberation? Because in Buddhist practice, discipline is not a phase. It is the expression of devotion. Devotion to your own awakening, to your path, to your clarity. You don't train because you are broken. You train because you seek to be free. Discipline, once born out of struggle, transforms. It no longer arises from fear or lack. It comes from love, from remembering the peace mindfulness brings, from honoring the stillness you've cultivated. You sit, not because you must, but because you remember what silence reveals. So if you find yourself in a season of success, don't loosen your awareness, deepen it. Use the ground you've gained not as a place to rest your identity, but as a foundation to climb higher into compassion, wisdom, and peace. And if you've drifted into sleep, no shame. Simply wake up, return to the breath, begin again. Not because you failed, but because you've remembered. And if ever you forget, return to this truth. Mindfulness carried you this far, and only mindfulness will carry you forward. Principle 5. Don't wait for the right feeling. Walk the path. Anyway, how many moments have passed while you waited to feel ready? We often wait for clarity to arise, for motivation to strike like lightning, for the energy to align as if the universe must grant us permission to begin. But this waiting is itself a form of suffering, a craving for the ideal condition that may never come. The Buddha taught that craving, tanha, is the root of our suffering. Craving the perfect mindset, craving the right mood, craving ease before effort. But peace doesn't come from chasing the right feeling. It comes from presence in the midst of whatever feeling is here. Motivation is not the gateway, it is the result. The momentum of mindful action awakens the heart, not the other way around. The mind, untamed, whispers delays. Maybe later. Just a little more comfort. You're not in the right headspace today. These thoughts are the voice of clinging, not clarity. And the voice that seeks comfort will always be louder than the voice that calls you to awaken. If you wait for silence before you step forward, you may never move at all. Feelings are impermanent. Motivation rises and falls like the tide. But mindfulness, sati, and right effort endure. This is why the practitioner does not ask, "Do I feel like walking the path today?" They simply walk it. Not because of inspiration, but because of understanding. The Buddha didn't say, "Practice only when the heart is light." He said, "Little by little, a wise person removes their own impurities, as a smith removes the dross from silver." That is not a mood, that is intention. Picture the monk rising at dawn. He does not ask himself whether he feels like meditating. He simply sits, he breathes, he observes, and in that stillness, not before it, comes focus, comes peace, comes understanding. This is the power of mindfulness, action rooted in awareness, not emotion. Yet we build lives around delay, waiting for the right energy, the right season, the right conditions. But impermanence, anicca, is the nature of all things. Life does not pause, time does not wait. If you want to live with meaning, with clarity, with compassion, with inner freedom, you must learn to move even when you feel resistance. Because that is when movement becomes transformation. Let's make it real. Don't want to meditate? Just sit. Breathe once. Then again. Don't want to study the Dharma? Open the book. Read a single line. Don't want to face what's difficult? Take one conscious breath and begin anyway. This path is not about perfection. It is about presence. Because once you engage, even gently, the mind begins to settle. The heart begins to open. What once felt overwhelming begins to soften. The Buddha understood. The most difficult part of awakening is often the beginning, the first breath, the first moment of seeing clearly, the shift from reactivity to awareness. That is where your strength lives. Not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in small, consistent acts of mindful effort that move you from clinging to clarity. So ask yourself gently, what am I postponing, waiting to feel ready? And then go deeper. What if I no longer needed to feel ready at all? Because once you learn to act with awareness instead of emotion, you become something rare. Not someone who waits to feel peaceful, but someone who creates peace by showing up anyway. Principle 6. Live by mindful intention, not conditioned habit. How much of your life is truly chosen, and how much is simply the echo of past conditioning? It's a question that cuts through illusion because most of us are not truly living. We're reacting, responding not to wisdom, but to habit, carrying the weight of expectations we've never questioned, performing roles we didn't consciously choose, repeating patterns we've never seen clearly. We wake up, reach for the phone, step into routines, chase goals, engage in conversations, not out of presence, but out of programming. Not because they arise from truth, but because they feel familiar. And in a world that values comfort, familiarity becomes mistaken for freedom. The Buddha taught that our suffering arises not only from craving, but from ignorance, from failing to see clearly. And one of the most dangerous forms of ignorance is unconsciousness, the sleepwalking mind. As the Dhammapada says, the untrained mind runs here and there like a monkey in the forest. Unless we bring awareness, our life is ruled by restless habit, not by conscious choice. The modern mind drifts easily into sankhara, the deeply ingrained mental formations that govern our behavior. These are the inner stories we inherit, the karmic imprints of past thoughts and actions. And unless we bring mindfulness to them, they shape our future without our knowing. Until you observe the mind, it will act upon you, the masters say. But when you observe it, truly compassionately, you begin to act with it. Discipline, from the Buddhist view, is not about force. It's about awareness. It's not about suppressing emotion, but understanding its origin. It's not about obeying a script, but seeing through the illusion that there ever was one. Mindfulness allows us to pause, to breathe before reacting, to ask, is this mine? Did I choose this? Or am I simply replaying something inherited, something automatic, something rooted in fear? Much of what we call discipline is simply conditioning, karmic momentum mistaken for truth. Perhaps you were raised to believe that only through achievement you are worthy, so now you exhaust yourself chasing praise and call it purpose. Perhaps you avoid confrontation, not from peace, but from fear, and call it compassion. These are not mindful acts. They are reactions born of unawareness, and they shape your life more than you realize. To live with Buddhist wisdom is to slow down and look deeply. Why do I seek this goal? Why do I speak this way, eat this way, think this way? Does it lead to liberation or just repetition? When you begin to live from awareness, yoniso manasikara, deep reflection, everything shifts. You stop drifting through samsara, the endless cycle of unconscious reaction, and begin walking the path toward awakening. You stop running someone else's program and begin living your own intention. You don't just accept the past, you investigate it. You keep what's aligned with truth and gently release what binds. This is the heart of right effort, not struggling against yourself, but mindfully choosing the path that leads to clarity. In daily life, it might look like choosing silence over distraction in the morning, pausing before anger arises, and choosing compassion instead, questioning a belief you've carried for years, and finally letting it go. These may seem like small shifts, but in the mind, they are revolutions, because now they are conscious, they are free. So pause today, breathe, reflect. Where in your life are you still living from habit, not wisdom? What part of your so-called discipline is actually fear in disguise? And what would it mean to act, not from programming, not from pressure, but from presence? Because true discipline in the Dharma is not rigid control. It is gentle remembrance of who you are when you are fully awake. And when your actions arise from mindfulness, not momentum, that is not just clarity, that is freedom. Principle 7. Who you are in stillness shapes who you are in the world. True character is not built in the spotlight. It is shaped in silence, in the unseen moments, in the quiet hours when no one is watching, praising, or judging. That is where the real practice begins. The Buddha taught that the mind is the forerunner of all things. Our thoughts, words, and actions, especially when unobserved, create the karma that shapes our future. It's not who you pretend to be that defines you. It's who you are when the world isn't looking. We live in a time obsessed with appearances. Social media rewards projection, not presence. We are praised for surface, not substance. But in Buddhist wisdom, it is what lies beneath, the unseen discipline, the unspoken vows, the quiet restraint that builds the foundation of awakening. As the Dhammapada says, as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. Public approval is fleeting. True stability is forged in solitude. Even the Buddha, after his enlightenment, spent years in retreat, not to impress, but to deepen his clarity, his compassion, his stillness. Because the battle isn't with the world, it's within the self, and it is fought gently but persistently in each private moment. Let's make it tangible. Anyone can teach mindfulness, but do they return to the breath when frustration arises at home? Anyone can share a quote about peace, but do they practice patience when no one will notice? Anyone can perform kindness in public, but do they carry compassion into their thoughts, their intentions, their quiet inner dialogue? This is the heart of Sla, moral integrity, not for show, but for transformation. The moments that matter most aren't grand, they're intimate. The early morning you rise when the body resists, the evening you sit in stillness instead of reaching for distraction, the conversation you choose to meet with compassion rather than judgment. These may feel invisible, but they are the roots, and only with deep roots can you grow a tree strong enough to weather life's winds. There is a shift that happens when your private actions align with your highest intentions. You develop something deeper than motivation. You cultivate self-trust. And self-trust is not ego. It is peace. When you know deeply that you will honor your path whether anyone sees it or not, you move through the world differently. You don't need to perform. You don't need to seek approval. You walk with quiet clarity, because your life is not a performance. It's a reflection of your practice. But the opposite is also true. When we repeatedly break our own promises, when we avoid the uncomfortable, speak unkindly, or act carelessly in the shadows, it accumulates. It shapes us, not just in karma, but in how we see ourselves. The confidence fades, the restlessness grows, because deep down, we know, I am not fully walking my path. This is why the Buddha didn't teach us to impress the world. He taught us to be free from it. And that freedom begins in solitude, with the choices we make when no one is keeping score, with how we treat the moments no one will ever praise us for. Those moments are sacred. That is the true training ground of awakening. So ask yourself, who am I when the world is silent? When there is no audience, only my breath, my heart, my mind? What kind of karma am I planting in the stillness of my own life? Because the version of you that exists in the quiet, that private, present, unfiltered self, is the one shaping your path. And the more that self aligns with truth, with compassion, with clarity, the less effort it takes to live well in the world. Because then, you're not performing anymore. You're simply being. Principle 8. Act like the self you are awakening into. Every choice you make shapes not just your future, but your becoming. In Buddhist wisdom, the self is not fixed. It's fluid, unfolding with every moment, every breath, every action. As the Buddha taught, what you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you do, you create. There is no static you, only the karma you weave, moment by moment, through your thoughts, your speech, your behavior. This means that each action, no matter how small, is more than a task. It's a practice, a message, a step in becoming the person your heart already knows you can be. So ask yourself honestly, who am I training myself to become? Not in theory, not 5 years from now, but in the quiet patterns of your daily life. When you speak, when you rise, when you respond to challenge, are those actions in harmony with the person you respect? Or are they echoing the old patterns you've outgrown? If you wish to become steady, wise, compassionate, you must begin practicing it now. Not perfectly, but deliberately. That is right effort. The disciplined, gentle work of planting the seeds of the mind you want to live within. Let's bring this down to earth. You want to be a writer? Then write, even when the words resist. You want to cultivate calm? Then breathe mindfully when anger knocks. You want to be fit? Then treat the body like a sacred vessel, not tomorrow, but today. You want to be wise? Then listen more than you speak. Study, reflect, observe. These aren't just habits. They are votes cast for the future self you are becoming, not through pretending, but through practicing. There is a vast difference. You don't fake clarity, you train it. You don't wait for inner strength. You build it, one honest moment at a time. And slowly, something begins to shift. The mind catches up. The heart begins to trust. And the identity you used to chase becomes the one you inhabit with grace. Even the Buddha, after his awakening, continued practicing. Why? Because awakening is not a destination. It is a direction. And every day we walk that path again with fresh steps. Marcus Aurelius journaled not to appear virtuous, but to realign himself with who he wanted to be. Likewise, the Buddhist practitioner reflects daily, not to shame the self, but to refine it, to let go of what no longer serves and embody what leads to liberation. Understand, becoming someone new is not comfortable. It asks you to surrender the familiar, the excuses, the emotional reflexes, the limiting identities, and that surrender feels like loss until it reveals itself as freedom. So here's the invitation. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start practicing as if your awakened self is already within you. Act like the one who breathes instead of reacts. Act like the one who speaks truthfully, even when it trembles. Act like the one who rises with intention, eats with awareness, and protects their time like it is sacred, because it is. Every step on this path, however small, matters. Because discipline isn't a punishment, it's a devotion, a sacred signal to your future self saying, I haven't given up on you, I am preparing for you. And if you're walking this path quietly, without applause or shortcuts, just with sincerity and presence, you are not alone. Keep practicing, keep refining, keep showing up like it matters, because it does.